G'day, welcome. I'm Stephen Travers. Let me just position here a little bit better. Uh, nope, I think I think we'll make do with that. G'day, how are you? Good to have you. This is yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you, Ali. Yes, I am back. Talking about being back because I've had almost 2 weeks off YouTube with my second bout of COVID. So it wasn't nearly as bad as my first COVID bout, but I still thought it was best to rest. So I've had it feels like a holiday, and today I did my first video. So hi there, Jessica. Hello, Seville, Valorf, Amy. Hi, welcome back. Yeah, so it's I had a video which I was about to make when I suddenly realized I really wasn't that well a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And so that's the one I made today on perspective and we're looking at perspective in terms of a streetscape take on perspective. So I've been thinking about that video for 2 weeks, so that made it easier to make it. But for tonight, I thought I'd think of answering questions that you might have on drawing or the drawing journey in some way. So exactly what we talk about will depend on you having some questions. However, before that, I thought I would just have a couple of other things to say about maybe YouTube. I thought a couple of thoughts that I've been mulling around about the whole YouTube process, because again, I've had a couple of weeks disconnected from it, and it's been an interesting time just to think about what am I doing and why am I doing it and how's it working and all of those bigger picture things. So I'll start with the first one of those, the longer one of those, to give you time to think of some questions. Greg, how do I find my community channel? How do you find my community channel? Look, if you're on your phone, go to my homepage and there's a ribbon menu along the top. Now you have to swipe that ribbon menu to the left to get to community. If you hit that, that will take you to my community page. I'm not sure exactly on a desktop. It's probably the same process on a ribbon menu along the top of my homepage. So, what are my thoughts, my reflections on creating a successful YouTube channel? And I thought being presumptuous enough, hello friends, being presumptuous enough to think that my channel's had some success. Why has that happened? What's enabled that to happen? And look, let me say right from the start, people can have YouTube channels for all sorts of reasons and have all sorts of goals. And so, you know, but if one of them, or if the main reason is to create some income, to get some ongoing income through our creativity, and that certainly was the case for me, then we need to have a successful channel, in the sense that we need to have people watch our videos, watch what we do. So how does that happen? Why does that happen for some people and not for other people? Or it seems to happen for some people more easily and not for other people as easily. What does it relate to? And look, I think I realized that in terms of my long working life, where I've done really quite a number of things, did spend almost 20 years in retail. And I think in lots of ways, running a YouTube channel, and I realize this has affected my thinking, running a YouTube channel is a lot like running a retail business with a product to sell. Now, the product that we sell is our videos, and our customers pay for it in their time, because time is a very important commodity. It's a very important asset or currency that we have. And we're wanting people to pay us with their time to watch what we're doing. So the question is what I'm doing worth someone's time? But the problem is, as is the case with many retail markets, there's lots of competition. But in the main street, in the bricks and mortars retail, there might only be one or two competitors close by. But in the online world, there are thousands, there are tens of thousands, there are potentially hundreds of thousands of competitors one click away. So, why are people going to be clicking on my channel? Why are they going to be spending their time, their life on the videos I've created rather than the videos that someone else has created? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. What am I offering? What exactly is my product? Um, what's the purpose? They may be watching for the actual content in some way, whether that's teaching or entertaining or something else. It may be the actual content. They may be attracted by the high production values of the video, which clearly isn't the case with me, with my videos. Um, but it is, but it is highly competitive, and I think that's the important. I think that was the helpful thing for me with retail was that I came to learn early on that it wasn't what I thought was a good idea, but it's what my customers wanted that created a successful retail business or not. And so it's been easy to carry that across. I've had to realize that a successful channel isn't necessarily my doing what I would like to do all the time or necessarily the way I would like to do it. I would rather not make so many videos on perspective, but in terms of a channel, it's a very helpful drawing channel. It's a difficult topic for many people, and perspective videos do get watched. And if you can get them being suggested by the algorithm, it's to the advantage of the channel. So, yeah, sometimes we have to make choices that are based around what our customers want to buy with their time. So, yet when we start, it's easy to have a focus on ourselves and think this is about me expressing myself and showcasing my work and getting approval and applause or whatever. And in the end, it's not. It's about me producing a product that people are going to want to buy. As I said, perhaps there's no more expensive currency than our time, because we only get each minute of our day once and then never again. So if we want people to give us their life as it moves by minute, then we need to have something that they're wanting. And so I think having that focus has been very helpful. So that's my first reflection on running a YouTube channel. But we have a question. How do I draw from imagination? So with this video, I'm actually wanting questions to answer. So if there are things and I don't mind whether they're sort of more technical question or bigger picture questions, but in some way connected to our drawing journey. How do I draw from imagination? Well, look, this is not something that I do very much at all. But so I don't want to put myself as an expert, but I would say that if you if I want well, let me put it to you this way. If I was wanting to learn to be able to draw from imagination, then I would use references for whatever subjects I was wanting to learn to draw, and I would really focus and double down on drawing as much as I could of those subjects from references and understanding any particular skills or theories that I need to have or to know. So if I wanted to draw architecture from my imagination, I would certainly need to understand how perspective works in quite a comprehensive way, because it's not going to be good enough just to be able to copy accurately the perspective I see in front of me in a photo or in life. If I want to draw people, I'm going to have to understand anatomy and have at least some sense of the muscles that are under the skin and how they work, so that I have an intuitive sense of what's happening. And I'm going to also have to understand how perspective affects people as well. If I'm looking up at a figure or down at a figure, or if a figure is twisted and bending away from the waist in a certain direction, all of that will distort how I see the person. So there's no way I can start to draw this accurately from my imagination if I haven't learnt to nail it using references, and then gaining whatever particular skills I need to have. For instance, if I want to do, let's say, naval drawings of ships, then I'm going to need to work out, how do I draw or paint the ocean? Because it's, most ship scenes have water in them somewhere, or clouds in the sky, whatever. I'm going to have to not just learn how to draw the ships from whatever angle I'm looking at, but I'm going to have to uh, work out how to draw the support acts of that 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 subject. So that's what I would do. I would actually not draw from imagination until I developed a fairly good set of skills of drawing these things from references. And then I would also start with, when I began to draw from imagination, I would start with simple subjects, the simplest subjects I could for what I'm trying to do, and not become more complex in those until, again, I could get them right, until I could get them correct. Okay, here's another question. Would you like someday to create my own architectural style? Yeah, well, I'm not an architect, so I've never really had to. Look, I'm not an architect, although I did consider it when I left school. I do like history a lot. I was a history and English teacher, high school English history teacher, for a few years, a very long time ago. And I have always really enjoyed history. So I think because of that, I do enjoy the more historical architectural styles. So I don't really feel like creating my own style is something that I want to do. But thank goodness some people really enjoy that, because otherwise our architecture would never move on. What are some techniques to use when the blank pages overwhelm me, my sense of creativity preventing me from starting? Okay. Look, this is something I've known well in my drawing life. When the page is blank, how do I get myself going? How do I overcome whatever's in me that's stopping me from drawing? Look, and I think one of the first things to do is, if at all possible, work out exactly what is the problem. Exactly why am I procrastinating? Exactly why have I got the paper there? I've got the pen there. Everything's ready, but I'm still walking around, and it's still hard to sit down and to start. Exactly, in as much detail as possible, is the problem. Because the more I understand something, the more I can address it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy to address it, but it's going to be easier than if I don't understand what's happening. Yeah, and look, it's often to do with a sense of failing, that I'm going to waste my time, that I'm going to prove to myself I can't draw, and that for some reason is overwhelming. That the thought that my drawing may not work out is somehow going to say something about me that I don't want to hear, or I'm afraid of hearing, and so I don't try because it's safer. But what I would suggest is to, if that's the case, and look, I've got quite a few videos on perfectionism and overcoming perfectionism, so possibly have a look for some of those. But some of the things we can do is we can give ourselves um, a strict time, short time frame to draw, so that we have to, in a sense, we have to rush it. We force ourselves to rush it. So we say, okay, if perfectionism is my problem, I'm not going to use a pencil. I'm going to draw only with pen, because then I don't have to worry about erasing. I can't buy into that whole erasing every second line, and I can just get stuck into it. I have to just push through my mistakes, and I'll give myself a 10-minute, 15, 20-minute max, so that in a sense, I'm almost setting myself up to not do my best drawing by putting time pressure on it. And therefore, I don't have the pressure that it has to be perfect, because I've given myself permission that it won't be. And I find that that can be very helpful. Nigel, I'm currently drawing daily self-portraits. What a great thing to do. A5 size pencil and water-soluble pencil. I love what this reveals to me about each day, but would be interested in suggestions for mixing things up. Well, I'm not sure if you mean mixing up uh, doing self-portraits, but I would suggest firstly changing the media that you use. So just do them in graphite. Maybe do one with a fine B line where although it's in pencil, your values are produced by hatching, by line work, not by shading, not by rubbing the edge of the graphite. Or equally, you could do a portrait with a 6B pencil and really get stuck into the smudge and the darkness that graphite gives you. Or you could use willow charcoal, a fine charcoal. You could use just colored pencils, not water soluble ones, but colored pencils. And certainly you could use ink. You could use marker pen. You could, yeah, um, let alone, well, you've mentioned watercolor. So is that the sort of thing you're asking? You could also change the size, or you could work at doing. You haven't said how long you spend doing them, but if you spend, say, 30 minutes drawing it, you could do a series of 5 minute or 6 minute drawings in a row, where you turn your head or angle your head in some way and get almost an animation type effect. There are some suggestions for mixing things up. Ali, what are you saying? Some troubles about coloring. Can I ask you that as how I can create effects of 3D with black and white on an object I never seen before? For example, a dragon or an alien. Creating 3D effects it doesn't matter really whether we're seeing something in life or in a photo, or it's from our imagination. The technique that I use, basically what we want to do is replicate the fact that in life, things that are closer stand out more, and values and colors are brighter and darker, and we see more detail when things are close. So when we have an object which has depth, and it doesn't have to have a lot of depth, what we can do is that the parts of the object that are closest to us as the viewer, we draw those as the artist with more detail, with a stronger line, maybe a thicker line, with harder edges, pointier joins to our angles and all of that. And if we have color, that the color is brightest when it's closest. If we have value, if we have light and dark, the lights and darks are lighter. The darks are darker when they're closer than when that same level of darkness is further away. And generally, we reduce the detail as the object goes further away. Now, it depends whether we're talking about something that's this big, or whether we're talking about a colonnade on a building, which might stretch back for 50 meters. But we can still play with these elements of creating a 3D effect, I think, quite happily, with relatively small things that we're seeing relatively close up. How do you best scale up and down from a subject photo? Well, it depends. It depends how you want to do it. If you, with my Instagram drawings, for instance, I used a grid. I drew those using 4x4 grids and with a pencil underlining. But for my YouTube channel, I switched to drawing freehand in ink, which makes it a bit different. Look, I mean, drawing from a reference, the easiest thing is to draw actual size as the reference. So that's what I usually do with my YouTube videos. But sometimes they just happen to end up larger, particularly if there's detail. So but again, I think intention is a very helpful thing. So working out, what do I want to do? Am I wanting to draw this larger or smaller? Sometimes what I do is I choose where I start in a way that will help me do that. So look, starting in the center of our subject is a good way to help us keep the scale under control, because if we make mistakes, we're making mistakes in all the directions rather than piling them up in one direction, one after the other. And so it's easier to kind of see where things are going and pull things back into the right sense of proportion. But yeah, I'm just trying to think, how do I best scale up? It all depends, really, the first part of the drawing I draw, I suppose. I look at my reference, and if I'm thinking I want it to be half the size again, whatever part I draw first, that's the part where I really want to make sure that that first element of the building or the scene is approximately half the size again. And then that becomes my measuring point for the rest of what I do. So just me. If I feel a bit hesitant to draw, I just draw squares and lines, circles and arches, hatching until my enthusiasm to do a picture comes. Jim, great idea, Jim. Great idea. Sometimes the hardest thing is just getting the marks on paper, and this might be a helpful thing for our hesitant drawer from further up. That or was that you? I can't remember, but yeah. So get some scrap paper and just start playing around where there's no pressure, because I'm just doodling, and start to experiment with how the pen feels and how the ink flows. Can be a great thing. Have I ever been to Lyon in France? Because the architecture is so. No, I've never been to Lyon. I've really only been to Paris, except for just ducking up to Giverny one day, doing the Impressionist tourism trail up there. And I did catch the train to Toulon, because apparently I'm related to one of Napoleon's admirals who had his ship blown out from under him by the British at the, Trafalgar. And my mother wanted to go and see Toulon, which is the naval base, French naval base on the Mediterranean. So that was one wonderful 3-hour train trip from Paris, and then we caught the Riviera day Express to northern Italy. So I just saw a bit of the beautiful French Mediterranean coast. But honestly, there's so much to see in Paris. It's very hard to get out of Paris when it's just a week or two that we have there. So yeah, I'm sure Lyon is magnificent. Hello, I'm learning to draw statues now, but my line skills is very bad. Can you tell me how to improve line skills in art? Look, yeah, I would say I would say stop thinking about lines and start thinking about the form of what we're drawing. One of the problems I think we often have is that we start off as children who like to draw, often drawing cartoons, copying cartoons, or drawing cartoon in a cartoon-like style, which is very dependent on lines, on outlines. And outlines produce a very flat two-dimensional appearance because three dimensions has shape, has form. So so this bit of paper has shape. It's a rectangle. But if it were a box, it would have form, it would have depth as well, it would have three dimensions. And when we draw, we're wanting to capture three dimensions. So we're using all those techniques for expressing depth that I mentioned before. But it also creates a different focus because we're trying to capture the effect of the form, not an outline. And so I found that I've stopped thinking of drawing lines when I draw, and I think of putting marks on the paper. Now, some of the marks are in fact lines, but by no means are they all lines. And even the ones that you could call lines have a great deal of variation in them. And for instance, if I'm just looking at what's on me on the table. Well, let's go back to this sheet of paper. If I would, it's all reversed. If I were drawing this, then I could draw lines here and here. But if I were drawing my arm is curving away. It's not a straight line. It's not a clear, hard edge the way the edge of a sheet of paper is. My arm curves away. Now, do I do a line the same for here as I would for the sharp edge of the paper? Or would I do a softer line? Would I do a line that varies from maybe up here to down here in some way? These are the things I think that that create incredible feeling in our drawings. It's by having lines that aren't all the same. Now, sometimes I know with architecture, with streetscapes that go back a long way, that the furthest away things, I often draw them very quickly and with a much lighter feel in the marks I make. And that helps to create a sense of distance. If we draw all our lines in the same way, they would tend to look the same. And so actually developing different ways of drawing our lines, of making our marks, depending on what effect we're trying to create. And for me, it's all about creating an effect with my marks. It's not about drawing an object. It's not about defining a shape. It's about creating an effect, a visual effect of something that I'm seeing in front of me or on my reference. Does that answer some of that? Hello, I'm learning to draw again after not drawing for a long time. Your videos are super helpful and I'm making good progress. Well, that's very encouraging. Thank you, Dragon. It's funny how often people end up talking about, I often get comments about people saying, I haven't drawn for a long time. I want to, but I just wasn't able to for some reason. There does seem to be often some sort of blockage in our creative journeys that can last for weeks or months or years, or in my case, most of my life. But at whatever point we break out, it's a great day. So yeah, I'm glad you're back in it, and I'm glad my videos are helping. Are there any more questions about drawing? I'll give you my second point, just why I sit here and jabber on and hope that someone has got a question about drawing that they can ask me. My second reflection on having a successful YouTube channel, and look, I've got to say, this is something that people don't usually mention when you watch all the videos about, how to explode your YouTube channel, and I've watched 1,000 of those videos. I would often watch them when I'd go for my daily walks. And one thing that very few of them seem to mention, but if they flick up on the screen their various charts and graphs that YouTube give us as creators, I see usually happens, and certainly was the case in my case, and that's that there ends up being one video that grows crazy, that really is like a skyrocket going up in terms of the graph, and suddenly whatever perhaps slow and steady growth had been chugging up suddenly just goes like this. And when you look at the charts of channels that have taken off, there is one point and one video where that happened in a way that blew whatever else had happened to that stage out of the water. And that happened for me in April of this year with my video on creating the effective detail. And it was a video that in the first couple of weeks just did as well as any other of my videos that did reasonably well had done. And then it picked up a bit, and it picked up a bit, and then suddenly it just skyrocketed. And in what's this? It's December now, early December, so it's the 4th to the 12th. So in 8 months, it's had I don't know 1.1 million views, and it's in a category all on its own in terms of my videos. And obviously, the algorithm has been suggesting it to a lot of people. And there was a period where I was having 5,000 views an hour of this video on one very crazy day that I remember well. And that seemed to, and although that rocket ship does fall back down to Earth, sadly, we dream it will go on forever, but it doesn't. It does fall back to Earth. It did seem to trigger the algorithm to push half a dozen of my other videos, mostly about perspective, I'd say, um, as well. And it seemed to create a bit of a momentum that I'm still able to use. I mean, there are certainly still ups and downs, and it's nowhere, absolutely nowhere near that peak, but it's well above what it was the average viewing before that peak. So it does seem to me that having that one video that really hits the spot does seem to be a common factor for channels that have sort of broken past that initial slog period. And I haven't really heard people talk about that. So some more questions have come in. How does one learn to break things down in shapes? What's the best practice? Well, look, it really depends what you're drawing, Carlo. I mean, with buildings, they tend to be made of geometric shapes. It's almost like kids' blocks, and trying to one thing I look it, one thing I do with particularly ornate things is I take off all the decorations. I take off all the statues. I take off the pinnacles. I take off the bits that come out or go in, and I try and reduce it down to the very simplest shapes. So the squares, the rectangles, the cones, the the semi hemispheres, the dome shapes, whatever. I take off all the, and I just see what's the fundamental shape, and what are the proportions, and what are the alignments. So, for instance, if I have a spire that might go from a four-sided section to then it becomes eight-sided, what's the alignment of those eight sides to the four sides, and so forth. I work out when do things shift from being square on with something to being on the diagonal to something that's underneath them, and so forth. And then once we've got that clear, now I can put back on all the decorations because I know what they stand on. Um, yeah. Um, so I mean, yeah, that's what I do. Now, if it's a more organic shape, such as a person, a figure, well, that's where understanding anatomy comes in. If we can see the figure almost with X-ray eyes, so with the skin stripped off, if I can see the shapes of the muscles as they contract or expand for that particular pose, for that positioning, then that can help me to draw as well. It does depend a bit on what we're drawing. If I'm drawing a tree, I try and focus on a strong sense of three dimensions with the tree. Try and see it in its roundness, which can be very challenging with photos because photos particularly flatten trees and make them look quite flat. We lose that sense of depth that we get in life with two eyes rather than one camera lens. Um, so, but and then I try and just identify different parts of the canopy basically, and see what the pattern, the rhythm of the branches are. Hi dear, hi. Even though I already watch almost all your videos about the effect of detail, I can't seem to do the things I'm drawing. Do you have any advice on how I can improve the details? Um, um, well, if you've watched all my videos and and it hasn't been clear, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what else I can say. But the problem with drawing the details is that most of the time, I think what comes most easily is to overdraw the details. And this is the problem with drawing from photos, where we often can see the details in great detail very easily. And so then we feel that the pressure actually to actually draw them, because we've seen them and we feel that we have to include them. Whereas when we look at something in life, we we don't see all the details all at once. We may see the details directly in front of our field of vision, but beyond that, we have a sense of the details. We have a vagueness of details that we're not seeing with that same detail, with that same clarity that we get with our focus point. And therefore, when we draw, we can draw the detail in that focus point, particularly if it's closest to us, but we dial back the detail we draw. And I do find that as I move uh, as I move further back in my depth of plane of my drawing, I draw faster and faster because that helps me to draw less details, and I draw lighter and lighter lines because that also helps me to draw less detail and to have less strength, less visual strength in how something looks, and that's it's all to do with creating the effect. But I really think trees are probably the best subject to work on if you want to work on drawing the effect of details, because there is no way we can draw all the leaves, and so um, we need to draw the effect of the leaves. We need to draw the surface of the tree canopy and create marks. Don't think lines. Create marks that that create the effect of a mass of leaves, because we can't draw the individual leaves. And and yeah, unless of course we're very close and the leaves are very large. But most of the time, for the sort of scale of tree that we're drawing, uh, most trees are far enough back that we're drawing the canopy as a whole. We're drawing the effect of all the leaves. It's the same as when we have a crowd of people. As the people move further back, we draw less and less detail. And if we were to draw all the details, that would look weird. even if anatomically we manage to get it correct. And the problem is, the more detail I try to draw on figures that get smaller and smaller, the less chance I have of actually anatomically drawing them correctly, and they're going to start to look twisted and distorted because I'm trying to draw too much detail into the space that I have. Hi there, me too. Hi there, Lee. Must be late. Yes, 40 minutes late. But never mind. Dragon, I'm starting to learn and draw anatomy. Any tips on ways to practice it? Look, anatomy is not something I'm strong in myself. I prefer drawing buildings and trees to people and animals. So, but it's the same way we learn any skill. I suggest that you start simply. You start drawing simple forms, even simplified forms, well. And as you learn to draw simplified anatomical forms, whether they're people or animals, well, you then slowly increase the complexity by changing the pose or whatever, depending exactly what you're doing it. And to stay fairly focused in that, so that you have enough time, and to be really diligent in, if you're doing this yourself, if you don't have a teacher, the really important thing is to self-critique accurately. So if I'm drawing something but I'm not getting it right, and I don't realize that I'm not getting it right, then I'm going to get very used to seeing it wrong without realizing that it's wrong. So it's important to us to have some people that we can say, look, I've drawn this person drawn a person playing basketball. Does the person look right, or does it look a bit awkward? I mean, you need some fresh eyes sometimes to discover things that aren't quite right. And the thing with figures, with people, is that we are so used to seeing figures that if it's not quite right, it's usually a little bit more obvious than some other subjects. So it's really important to get some feedback on my figures looking right. But again, just don't go past what you can succeed in, or don't go very. I mean, it's always good to push ourselves, but yeah, I mean, you wouldn't give a child learning the piano a complex piece to play. You give them a piece that they have a chance to succeed in, because that's how they learn. Okay, you've taught me to be careful to get the scaling right when including people or cars into a picture, because getting that wrong can really make a good drawing not real. Yep. Scale is really important. Scale is something I have been thinking of doing a video on. And we often see problems with scale when people are put into streetscapes where it just doesn't work, where you think, well, that person is as large as the door, or that person is only halfway up the door, or if this person was slid along to here, they don't fit in with the other people who are drawn on the other side of the road, and so forth. So it is really important that we get scale right. And often scale becomes a problem because we've got the perspective wrong. And because the perspective is wrong now, it can become impossible to draw figures that don't look ridiculous. How can you stop from being overwhelmed by complicated architecture and know where to start? Well, you don't need to start with drawing complicated architecture. It's best, as I was saying, it's best to start with things that we can draw well, and then we add the detail bit by bit. I didn't start by drawing the Musée du Louvre. I started with simpler things, and then and I remember looking at the Musée du Louvre thinking, oh, I will never be able to draw this, and I have, but I didn't start with drawing that. So I think be inspired by the grand, complicated architecture that we desperately want to draw, but don't start with drawing that. Start with drawing something that we can draw well, that we won't be overwhelmed with, and therefore we can be encouraged by when we finish it. Um, yeah. Does that make sense? With so that by the time you're doing complex architecture, you're also more experienced in where you start. And I mean, where you start really does depend on your drawing style. If you've watched my drawing videos, as you probably have, you'll notice that because I'm drawing freehand in pen, I'm drawing directly in pen, I can't, or I don't rough out the shapes, the big picture shapes, because I can't erase any of the lines. So I tend to start with a small section that I spend a fair bit of time on at the start to get the proportions correct. And then I move out. And as I move out in all directions, or in whatever directions I need to move out from, I take particular care to make sure I align new things I'm drawing with what I've already drawn according to how it is in the reference. And I find that most of the time, yeah, gets me to the place I need to go at the end of the drawing. And I mean, you watch me do it. If you watch those drawings, maybe double time, but or 4 times even, depending. But you can see how that system works. Dragon, thank you so much. So many videos. Yeah, and look, how quickly we change effects does depend on the subject, on what we're trying to create. But yeah, the thing is, what works best in this scene with the materials I'm using to create it for what I'm wanting to do. That's what it is. A few of you are going to get some ads now. I'm being warned. So if you do, please let them run. That's helpful for me. Any more questions about drawing? I had a question on Instagram today. Someone sent me a DM and they said that it was something like what someone was starting architecture and they said, can you give me some advice that will encourage me to go on when it gets tough? Something like that. And I thought, goodness, it's almost like I don't know, break glass in case of an emergency. What advice could I give to what advice could I give as a general encouragement to adapt, to use if you felt like giving up? And I thought about it for a bit, and I think my advice was, yeah, as you move forward and develop in your course and in your art, make sure that you always compete with yourself, not with other people. Because it occurred to me that if I compete with myself, if I push myself against what I've seen myself do, and I've pushed myself to do better, and I do it in an intelligent and intentional way, but if I compete against myself, I will always be pulling more out of myself at a better and better, higher level. I will always be improving myself if I'm competing against myself, because every time I win, I'll win by doing something better. Whereas if I see other people as my competitors, then firstly, I'm letting them lead me rather than lead myself. But secondly, I may not I may not have in me what they have in them as their starting point. And I don't mean better or worse, I just mean different. And so, therefore, if I'm trying to compete with outcomes that are better than their outcomes in the same terms, I may just be setting myself up to fail totally because, in a sense, I haven't had the journey to develop what they've got in place to be producing that. But I but if I compete against myself, I can always improve. I can always refine where I've come from, and I can certainly set new directions, but I'm steering the vessel I'm already into those new directions. I'm not trying to jump to a place that I've never been over a long distance. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, yeah. Always, if I'm discouraged with my art, it's often because I see what other people do and think, I want to have that. I want to be able to do that. And that's always going to set us up, I think, for further discouragement. What I need to do is to be saying to myself, how can I improve on what I'm doing? How can my next drawing be better than my last drawing? What do I need to change or to work at or whatever for that to take place? Okay. How do you make your art more dynamic with movement and life, like closed wrinkles or flowering leaves so your art doesn't look flat? Look, I think focusing on, I don't know if you were here a bit earlier when I was talking about focusing on thinking of making marks rather than drawing lines, I think is a very helpful thing to do, because what we're trying to do is not to outline objects on paper, which I think, without perhaps being recognized, is often the goal of many drawings. At least the way the drawings look at the end makes it appear that that's the goal, to get an accurate outline of whatever objects are the subjects of the scene, instead of creating an effect by using marks, some of which are lines, on the paper. And that way we have a whole lot more at our disposal in terms of what we put on the paper and therefore what we can create. Because we're not looking at outlining, we're looking at creating something that all these marks together visually create something that no one of them can do. And so we particularly pay attention to whether lines are heavy or light, whereas as lines curve, whether they stay the same weight the whole way, or whether, in fact, even whether lines break at different points, that we actually create breakages in our lines. Because when we look at things, when we look at some forms, particularly a form that's curving away from us, visually there's a very different effect than if we're looking at, say, a block, a wooden block that has sharp edges, where perhaps we can draw a straight line, but with a form curving away from us, we perhaps want to have a lighter touch, at least in parts. And particularly in free form objects such as rocks, we want to have some lines that are heavier, some lines that are very light, depending on whether the objects the stone is coming towards us or moving away from us. And we also certainly want to have some breaks as well, to create the sense that we have weather in here now, where we actually don't have an edge. And so it's a mistake to draw lots of edges. Does that make sense? Hello, Min. Do. I'm a beginner and I want to sketch something, but my skills is not good enough. Can you suggest me the things I need to practice first? I've said a few times already tonight, I think what's important is you start at the beginning And when we want to draw, it's often partly because we've been inspired by artists' work that we've seen. We've seen drawings and we feel like, I've got that in me. I want to be able to do that. But we're not usually looking at the first drawings that that artist has done. And so while it's great to be inspired by them, it's not realistic to try and draw like them at the start. And of course, I don't really want to draw like them anyway. I want to draw the best I can for the creative style that's in me. And so what I need to do is to be inspired to to that this is a worthwhile thing to do, learn to draw. But then I need to start at the start of any learning process and realize that I need to start with simpler elements, and I need to keep working at those simpler elements until I can do them well. And then add more complex ones to them until I can do those well. And then I add more complex ones onto the next one, and so forth. So I do it that way. I don't get carried away. And it really is very sad often when I see lots and lots and lots of drawings on Instagram that are drawn really badly. And they're drawn badly because they are complex architecture that has just been beyond the person's skill level. And I can appreciate why they wanted to draw those buildings. But they've never had a chance of drawing them well because they haven't developed the skill within their whatever style they want to draw them, haven't developed the skill to draw that level of complexity. So start at the start. Think of learning a musical instrument. Start with very, very simple pieces of just a few notes until you can learn to play those notes well and get them right every time. And they're usually the easiest notes to play as well. And then slightly more difficult notes are introduced, and that gives the chance to play slightly more interesting pieces as well. And there's no set time for how long we have to stay at any one level until we feel like we've consistently done well at it, that it's helpful now to add a greater level of complexity. So yeah, start from the start. That's what I would suggest. And yeah, and have fun. Make sure you have fun. Don't put pressure on you to be excellent at the start because we all start at the beginning. A student from Vietnam, love drawing and watching. Thank you. That's very kind. Well, are there any other questions? We're just coming up to an hour, so yeah. If there's anything you want to ask me about drawing, now's the time, or about growing a YouTube channel, I guess, since I threw a few of those in at the start. Do we have any other thoughts or questions? All righty. Well, it looks like I get a. Does my wrist ever get sore while drawing? No, actually, it doesn't. It doesn't ever get sore. Yeah, no. But I guess I don't draw for that long. Although I do lots of drawings, mostly I draw for my videos now, and those drawings take 15 minutes to an hour. It's pretty rare for a drawing to take longer than an hour for YouTube because I just have to speed it up so much it becomes ridiculous. So really an hour, maybe an hour and a quarter max, which isn't really that long for something. And many days it's more like 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. So it's not too intense a period. My wrist would hurt more when I had jobs where I was typing all day, where I sat in front of a computer. So that probably upset my wrist more than than drawing. And of course, I can stop and I can flex and edit all those disruptions out of the video as well. So, do I still do any painting? No, look, I haven't done any painting really since I started drawing. I am. There are a few reasons for that, but I am wanting to do two things with painting. Um, I want to explore watercolor because that does go well with urban sketching, and I managed to get to my second Sydney urban sketching day on yesterday. Yes, yesterday in the CBD. So if you have one of those chapters, one of those groups in your city, I can recommend it, where you just meet up somewhere and draw something that's in your city or your town. So that was a lot of fun. And I, yeah, I think nearly all of them had watercolor, and so my poor black and white drawing looked very drab, and it did make me think, oh, I really need to get on with learning the watercolor. But I did do oil paintings, like the big tree behind me, for 10 years before I began drawing. And I would like to go back to the oil painting, but in a far more, if you like, graphic style, a far more gestural style than I did when I was painting, where I had a far more sort of naturalistic style. So in a sense, I'd like to see how some of the skills and techniques I've learned in drawing can inform my oil painting. So, because I kind of got not sick of it, but I did feel like I was in a rut when the chance to draw came up. Who are other YouTubers I like to follow? This is going to sound terrible, but I don't follow any other YouTubers. I don't watch, with the exception of YouTubers about how to grow a YouTube channel. Um, um, uh, yeah, I mean, I am self-taught, and by that I mean I just did it myself. I just kept drawing until I found a way to get a result that I want. Um, well, I can show you. Jessica wants to see my urban sketches. I have the drawing that I did yesterday that's in a sketchbook that is still on the table here. So you can see this one. This is the General Post Office, what used to be the General Post Office in Sydney, or part of it. We don't quite go down to ground level, and there's some Christmas decorations on a big pole and a flag and a big decoration. And just a bit further to the left, there is an enormous tree, artificial tree. So that's what I drew yesterday. That took about 60 minutes, and I'd probably spent another 60 minutes just doodling around, and I just did the tower first on it in a small book just to get a feel for making the marks. And looking up, I was a bit too close to it, so it was one of those drawings where you're kind of looking up and looking down. I have some more drawings in another book, but they're in another room. Yeah, but I certainly am trying to do more of that. So yeah, it was nice to meet up. I actually have been once before with Urban Sketches Sydney, and unfortunately, it was the final monthly meeting they had before COVID went crazy and Sydney went into lockdown, and then wasn't a chance to do anything for a long time. And then the dates just didn't seem to line up with days that I had free, but I'm hoping to make it a priority now. That's great, Chris. Well, there's no shortage of things to draw. That's good to hear. Okay, any final questions, or will we? Do I do any digital art? No, I don't do any digital art simply because I haven't. Um, um, One of my children does, and does some really amazing and fun animation type art, particularly digitally, which is just great to see. And sometimes I don't even really understand it enough to even talk about it. But yeah, the sense of layers that you can get is really looks like something that would be wonderful to explore and to play with. So who knows? Maybe I will. I've just got a new laptop, so maybe there are some possibilities there. But although I don't draw it, I can really enjoy looking at it, and I think anything in any area of life that's done well, I think is interesting. I mean, I've never particularly been overly interested in much sport, but I've always loved watching the Olympics because anything at world class level, I think, is compelling. Yeah, seeing excellence in any sphere is always breathtaking and inspiring. I think makes makes me want to try harder at something, even if it's not that. Even like those big engineering projects and things like that that are just mind blowing. Um, that they really, I find them inspiring. Okay, well, look, thanks very much, everyone. It's getting to be late on Sunday night here, so in Sydney. So probably most of the world, you've still got Sunday ahead of you. So enjoy Sunday, and why not try and squeeze a drawing in if you possibly can. But whatever you do, make sure you have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye.